Hey guys, so we're going to have a little fun today. Throughout the pandemic, it's become increasingly clear that academics have been lying to us about all this stuff, about masks, about vaccines, about lockdowns. It's been overwhelming, and public trust has dropped in academics for good cause because they lied to us. Their response is to constantly pretend that people pointing out the problems with them, that that's the actual problem. We have another example of a problematic academic. In this case, it's a woman named Emily Toth Martin at the University of Michigan. What's amazing to me is she actually advises the state and she teaches graduate students in epidemiology. Well, the reason why we're talking about her, so last April, the acting director for the CDC, who is NIH director, Jay Bhattacharya, he discovered that CDC scientists were using this study design called test negative to do these studies that then promoted the vaccines. And he said, no, we're not doing this anymore. This is low quality research. We need to do high quality research. So, of course, the CDC scientists, they run screaming their heads off, censorship, censorship, to Lena San at the Washington Post. They run to Apurva Mandavili at the New York Times. Stat News, of course, because Stat News is always there to promote big pharma messaging. I'm sure MedPage Today, the typical suspects who say, vaccines are awesome, don't ask any questions, just promote them, promote them, promote them. And last week, the CDC had a panel to hash out what is the best type of research for finding out how effective vaccines are. They had one person explaining why CDC is wrong, and CDC chose two people to explain why CDC is right using these low-quality studies. One of the people that they chose was this woman, Emily Martin, at the University of Michigan. I didn't have a chance to watch the entire debate, but I did watch her presentation, and I thought, this is very interesting. Who is this woman? So I looked into Emily Martin's background and I found out that, surprised, in 2022, she published an essay to say that masks work, wear your masks. And I was like, how does she do this? Because I'd already interviewed Tom Jefferson, who has published the Cochrane review, which it's very rigorous the way it looks at the research, and they found that there's not much evidence that masks work. So if the Cochrane review has found out that masks don't really work, how is Emily Martin able to say the opposite? So then I started doing what you're supposed to do in these situations. And this is a very, very important principle for you to understand. Fools skim the news. Amateurs read scientific studies, but experts study the footnotes. And I studied Emily Martin's footnotes. Here's the one section where she actually tries to make the case that masks work. There's a passage showed that one infection was averted for every 6 people wearing a mask. Well, that's interesting. How do you find out that masks are actually that effective? So I clicked on the link. This is studying the footnotes. How do you construct your argument? Again, study the footnotes. So her link opens up and goes to the Cochrane review on masks from 2007 that they then published in the BMJ in 2008. And you can see right there, the lead author is Tom Jefferson, the guy who's told me and has stated publicly several times that there's not much evidence that masks work. Yet here's Emily Martin citing Tom Jefferson to make the argument that masks work. Cochrane has released multiple versions of this study on masks. The first one you can see was in 2006. The next was in 2007. This is the one actually that Emily Martin cites. And then you had an update in 2010, in 2011, and in 2020. So what Emily Martin did is she reached back and she cited the early 2007 version of this study and ignored 3 updates because each one of those updates added in more and more randomized controlled trials that were being done. And they eventually concluded that the best available research shows that masks don't work. But Emily Martin ignored this to find a 2007 version of the Cochrane review so that she can make the argument that masks actually work. This is a typical type of citation sorcery. When I called Tom Jefferson up about this, he said that she had cherry-picked his early version that referenced low-quality studies because it gave her the answer that she wanted. And he starts laughing. He's like, she chose the version that told her what she wanted to know. The old versions are only there if you want to understand the history. Or if you're someone like Emily Martin who wants to cite an early version because it tells her what she wants to know. And this is the entire problem with people like Emily Martin and the agency scientists at the CDC using observational studies to make their arguments. They're scared of using randomized controlled trials because randomized controlled trials, well, it tells you right there, they're randomized, they're more controlled, and you don't know what's going to happen because you start studying it from the beginning all the way out to the end. You don't know from the beginning what the results are going to give you. You're not going back and fiddling with data to just get you an answer that you want. This entire issue with Emily Martin reminds me of this scene in Annie Hall Woody Allen is there with Diane Keaton, who's playing Annie Hall, and they're standing in line to go to this theater. And there's a loudmouth academic behind them spouting all this stuff about media philosopher Marshall McLuhan. And Woody Allen gets so annoyed because he hates blowhard academics like I do. And he starts complaining. Guy steps forward and he says, well, I teach at Columbia University and I should know something about what Marshall McLuhan says. And then suddenly out steps Marshall McLuhan and he says, you actually don't know anything that I'm talking about. And this is exactly what's going on with Emily Martin. She's trying to tell you that mass work based upon research done by Tom Jefferson. And Tom Jefferson is telling Emily Martin, you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah, now, Marshall McLuhan deals with it in terms of it being a high intensity, you understand? A hot medium.
What I wouldn't give for a large sock with horse manure in it.
Which he uses essentially
What do you do when you get stuck on a movie line with a guy like this behind you?
Wait a minute, why can't I give my opinion? It's a free country.
He can give you. You have to give it so loud. I mean, aren't you ashamed to pontificate like that? And the funny part of it is, Marshall McLuhan, you don't know anything about Marshall McLuhan's work.
Really? I happen to teach a class at Columbia called TV, Media, and Culture. So I think that my insights into Mr. McLuhan, well, have a great deal of validity.
Oh, do you?
Yeah.
Well, that's funny because I happen to have Mr. McLuhan right here. So yeah, just let me come over here a second.
Oh,
Tell him.
I heard what you were saying. You know nothing of my work. You mean my whole fallacy is wrong. How you ever got to teach a course in anything is totally amazing.
Boy, if life were only like this.
Anyways, guys, thanks so much for showing up. Keep coming back and have a great day.